The Battle of Okinawa, April 1st, 1945. This wasn't Europe. This wasn't some far-off beachhead. This was Okinawa, a tiny island, barely a speck on the map. But for the men who fought there, for the civilians trapped in the crossfire, it became a world unto itself. A world of fire, steel, and unimaginable suffering. This wasn't just another battle, it was a struggle for the soul of Japan. It was a taste of what a full-scale invasion of the Japanese mainland might look like. And it was terrifying. The outcome was never really in doubt. The Americans, with their industrial might, their overwhelming air power, they were going to win. The Japanese, battered but not broken, knew this too. But this wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about something else entirely. Something desperate, something primal. It was about fighting for every inch of ground, for every last breath. It was about honor, about sacrifice, about the terrible price of war. To understand Okinawa, you have to understand what came before. Years of brutal fighting across the Pacific, island hopping, attrition. The Japanese, fueled by a doctrine of absolute victory or honorable death, fought with a ferocity that shocked the world. Tarawa, Iwo Jima, each battle bloodier than the last. By 1945, the Americans were closing in on the Japanese mainland. But Okinawa, this small island just 350 miles south of mainland Japan, stood in the way. For the Americans, it was to be a staging ground, a place to launch the final assault. For the Japanese, it was the last line of defense. The Japanese strategy was one of attrition. Make the Americans pay for every inch of ground, bleed them dry. The goal wasn't necessarily to win, but to inflict so much pain, so much suffering, that the Americans would balk at the thought of invading the mainland. It was a desperate gamble, but with their backs against the wall, the Japanese were prepared to roll the dice. The initial landings on April 1st, 1945, caught the Japanese by surprise. The Americans, having learned from past mistakes, unleashed a massive naval bombardment. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers all rained down fire on the island. The sky turned black with smoke. The sea itself seemed to boil, but the Japanese were dug in deep. Tunnels, caves, fortified bunkers, all connected by a labyrinthine network of underground passages. They waited patiently for the shelling to stop, for the Americans to come ashore. And then all hell broke loose. The fighting was savage, hand to hand. Flamethrowers, grenades, bayonets. Men fought and died in mud, in rain, amidst the stench of death and cordite. The Americans, though better equipped, were stunned by the ferocity of the Japanese resistance. They had expected fanatical defense, but this was something else entirely. Fire and steel tactics of desperation. The Japanese, outnumbered and outgunned, resorted to desperate measures. Kamikaze attacks, suicide charges, human torpedoes. They launched themselves at the American fleet, determined to die for the Emperor. The Americans countered with overwhelming firepower. Artillery barrages turned the landscape into a lunar wasteland. Napalm rained down from the sky, incinerating everything in its path. The fighting raged for weeks, each side locked in a deadly embrace. But slowly, inexorably, the Americans pushed forward. Their superior logistics, their seemingly endless supply of men and material, began to take its toll. The Japanese, their ranks dwindling, fought with the courage of the damned, but it was a losing battle. Scars on the soul, the human cost. The Battle of Okinawa was a nightmare for all involved. Over 80 days of fighting, over 12,000 American soldiers were killed, with tens of thousands more wounded. The Japanese losses were catastrophic, with over 100,000 soldiers killed, many in suicidal charges. But it was the Okinawan civilians who suffered the most. Trapped between two armies, they endured unimaginable horrors. Shelling, firebombing, mass suicides. It's estimated that over 100,000 Okinawan civilians perished during the battle. The battle left an indelible mark on the Okinawan psyche. The trauma of that experience, the loss of life, the destruction of their homeland, continues to resonate to this day. Echoes of Okinawa, a harbinger of peace. The Battle of Okinawa ended on June 22, 1945, with the Japanese resistance finally extinguished. It was a Pyrrhic victory for the Americans, a bloody taste of what a full-scale invasion of Japan might look like. The battle had a profound impact on the decision to use atomic bombs against Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The sheer brutality of the fighting, the fanatical Japanese resistance, the fear of even greater losses in a mainland invasion, all weighed heavily on the minds of American leaders. Okinawa was a turning point. It was a battle that nobody won, a battle that left scars on both sides that would never fully heal. It was a testament to the horrors of war, and a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. But it also, in a strange way, helped to pave the way for peace. The horrors of Okinawa, the unimaginable suffering, served as a powerful deterrent, a warning of the even greater horrors that awaited if the war was allowed to continue.